5, 6.
That's enough.
The Cellar is a 2022 film about a family that moves into an old home and realizes that something is going on in the basement that leads to people disappearing. Now, this is a solid premise for a movie. And I will say in general, this movie does have all of the pieces that it needs to make a thoughtful and compelling horror film. The problem is it doesn't use enough of its premise in an effective way, and instead, it all kind of comes crumbling down in a very standard ghost slash demon chases someone around story. And the movie itself is about this family, but really, it mostly centers on the mom, Kira, played by Elijah Cuthbert, which I realized I hadn't seen in a long time, and I have no idea why. I mean, she's great here. Like, she also seems to be the only one that is doing anything. Like, the kids are just there to be either in danger or about to be in danger. And Jesus, you can forget about the husband. Like, the husband might as well have just been a cardboard cutout in every scene. And nothing against his acting, it was fine. But he was just completely useless in this story. And really, just in general, there were so many moments in this film where I was kind of scratching my head at the decisions that were being made. All right, for instance, let's getting back to the husband and his uselessness. So he does nothing in this movie, like absolutely nothing. Apparently, both he and his wife work for the same PR marketing company, and that's so that when the kids need to be home alone, there's an excuse for both of them to be out of the house at night. And that is when the daughter goes missing, kicking off the plot of this movie. But even after that happens, like the husband just kind of stands around the entire time just doing whatever, like seemingly oblivious that his daughter is missing. And it really got me thinking, like, why is he even in this movie? Like, this movie would have been immediately better if Kira was a single mom trying to deal with all of this. It would have made more sense of her leaving the kids at home alone because she had no choice. And it would have added a family dynamic that would have really helped later on when she was fighting for her daughter's life. Getting back to the story setup specifically, basically after this family moves into this new house that was bought very cheaply on auction, the kids discover an old recorder, like a record player, with someone counting on it. Now, when they play that counting, it seems to unlock something in the cellar which directly leads to the daughter going missing. Kira finds a series of strange things in the house, from symbols above the door to numbers carved into the stairs to math equations in the concrete floor. And this, tied with the recordings of the former house owner counting, causes these strange things to happen in the house. And so, because of this discovery, she starts to dig deeper into this mystery. Now, once again, as I'm sort of describing this, like, that all sounds great. But they made so many weird choices in this movie. And it's not just story choices, like, it's structural choices as well from scene to scene. Let me give you an example. There is this one scene where she finds a bunch of symbols above each of the doorways, and she doesn't know what they are. She decides to take a picture of all of them, then goes into work and asks her assistant to look them up. Now, in the very next scene, she has a brief meeting with her staff, and as she's walking out the door to leave the building, the assistant stops her and says that she found the answer to those pictures. Now, this is literally 2 minutes in runtime in the film between the point where she asks her to look it up and she gets the answer. Like, why bother having those two separate scenes? If it's going to be that fast, why not just discover it together in the moment instead of having like this expository couple sentences 2 minutes later when the assistant finds the answers? Now, normally, if a character doesn't learn something in a particular scene, it would become sort of a seed that's planted, and then that info would come back later on in the story. Like, let that linger, build some anticipation, let the audience forget about it for a bit, but don't put it right in the very next scene. And they do this exact same thing again later on where she decides to go seek out a mathematician slash physicist and explains what's going on in her house and then asks for help. She then gives him this equation that she found carved into the cellar floor, and he gives her his card, takes the equation, and says he'll get back to her and she's welcome to call him if she needs anything. Once again, in the very next scene, as she's driving home from seeing him in the office, he calls her and delivers all of the information that his character would have for the rest of the film and just lays it out right there on the phone. Like, why structure it like that? Why not discover it in the office in the moment? Or if you're not going to do that, have that come back later on and answer a question that you've been building up to. If it's just going to be the very next scene, it kind of becomes useless. And this is what I'm talking about on a grander scale of this film, where the ideas are there, but the execution of them are kind of muddled and just feel off and underutilized. Now, the last thing I want to say about this movie is going to get into some spoilers, so fair warning. Ultimately, it is a dimensional rift in the basement, which leads to this other realm. And as Kira is investigating, there's a scene in this movie where she goes to see the previous owner of this house and also the only surviving member of her family that had gone missing years ago. She is in a catatonic state, but she briefly comes out of it when Kira mentions the cellar. And she begins to talk about an ancient evil that's older than the universe.
That has existed since before the universe began. Something ancient.
My question is, why would a being that's older than the universe care about getting into a house and chasing people down hallways and getting its claws stuck in doors? Like, what is the motivation of this eternal creature in this scenario? Why does it seem like it's just a ghost moving these little things around, yet it is, in fact, from this other realm? And I still don't really understand how the counting opens this portal into this other dimension. But even if it does, why does simply counting open and close doors, cause objects to slide around, kind of like a ghost? Like, if the counting just opens a gateway, wouldn't it just be either open or closed? Like, why, when there is no counting, are objects moving around, doors kind of coming open, noises are heard everywhere? It's like they kind of wanted the ghost tropes as well as this sort of dimensional threat and didn't quite know how to marry the two. Overall, I will say this movie looks really good, and it is acted very, very well, except for maybe a few cringe lines from the boy, but I mean, he's a child actor. That's always kind of a crapshoot. But the biggest problem with this film is it never really utilizes its premise very well. I loved all that sort of mathematics and dimensional talk. It's nice to go that route instead of the traditional religious route. That was such a nice touch. But once again, the ideas here were just not the problem. Given what it ends up being, it feels a little deflating that it just amounts to nothing more than kind of regular ghost stuff. I'd give it a C+, but let me know what you think.